Welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast with Scott MacKenzie. Scott is a passionate industry professional dedicated to transferring cutting-edge, industry-focused innovations and trends while highlighting the men and women who keep the world moving. So put on your hard hat, grab your work boots, and let's go.
All right, welcome. Thank you very much for joining Industrial Talk. Thank you for your continued support of this platform, this number one industrial-related platform in the universe. We celebrate you, industry professionals all around the world. You're bold, brave, you dare greatly, you innovate, you collaborate. You're solving problems each and every day. You're making the world a better place. That's why we celebrate you here on Industrial Talk. Take that to the bank for what it's worth. Coming from me. I'm such a fan, as you can tell. All right, this is a lengthy conversation, a very cool and worthy conversation. Justin is his name. And the company is OCT or OCTO, which is cool. It's a great name, all right? And I'm going to hopefully say his last name correctly, Sirotin. Sirotin. All right. Let's get cracking with the conversation. Yeah, okay. We're going to go right into the interview. But before we do that, keep in mind, Industrial Talk is here for you. You, right here. Industrial Talk. Go out to industrialtalk.com. It's here for you. And it wants to amplify your message in whatever capacity. You have a podcast. You're saying, Scott, I want more amplification. And I'd say, well, just stick it out on Industrial Talk. I can help you through that process and it's easy peasy. Or if you have a technology that you want to make sure people know about, and it really is a game changer, which they're all game changers. Innovation is fantastic out there right now. But you're saying it is a game changer. Well, come talk to me. Go out to Industrial Talk and say, yeah, I'm interested. I want game-changing amplification. And then if you want to be on the podcast, just because you're cool and you're in industry and you have something to say that will help people in their journey, along on their journey, all of that stuff, well, talk to me. Look at allroadsindustrialtalk.com. Just have that conversation with me. If it doesn't work out, no big deal. But I guarantee you, it's going to work out because you have something to say, something to amplify, something to help individuals within the industrial market to be better, to solve challenges. That's what I believe. We talked to a number of companies, and all of them, they're just have such a tremendous passion for helping people succeed. That's my plug. Now off the soapbox. All right. He is in the hot seat. Justin is. And OCTO is the company, and it's very cool. I'm just telling you, it's really a great conversation. Tremendous insight. Justin just beep, 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 backs up the truck and just lays out all of this great insights. Fun conversation. All right, here's Justin. Justin, welcome to Industrial Talk. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Wow, come on, bring the energy, baby.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Man. I don't want to be the one that's annoying.
Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. I'm doing actually very, very well.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to this conversation just because I'm a big fan of design. Listeners, we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about how you can make the experience much more better. If I could use that, that's what we're talking about. This is what the company OCTO, does that stand for anything?
No, it's just Octo.
That's it? Octo.
That's it. It's got a funny backstory, which I'm happy
please
to share.
Bring it on.
So Octo, we've been around for about 15 years. And when we were crafting the naming companies is a nightmare.
Yes, amen.
Nightmare.
Oh,
and so we were naming the company and trying to decide, did we want the name to mean anything or did we want the name to just be generic? And we kind of came to the conclusion that having the name mean something would be fun. And I found this video on YouTube of an octopus that got caught by a fisherman, pulled onto the boat, changed from brown to white immediately because the boat was white, and then started to walk on its legs across the boat, climbed up the other side of the boat, jumped in the water. As soon as it hits the water, it changes color and becomes something else. And we thought, like, okay, well, that's us. We transform ourselves into whatever form we need to be in order to satisfy the needs of our client base, of our customers. And we behave like an octopus. We're curious. We change shape. We change color. And we couldn't get the name octopus, so we just said we took what we could get. We got Octo. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
That's the
so it's not because it's in capital letters. I thought it was OCTO.
No, stands not an acronym. Stands for nothing. It's just the first part of the word octopus, and that's all we could get.
It sounds like a superhero.
We are superheroes, obviously.
Well, there you go. Yeah, guilty as charged.
That's right.
So sort of own it. Own
That's right.
Superhero. So let's just dive into who you are there, Justin, real quick. And we've already got the Octo background.
Yeah.
Give us a little background on who you are.
Sure. So I have a background. My degree is actually industrial design.
Yeah.
I've been in the field for about, gosh, I hate to admit it. I'm coming up on 30 years, which is terrifying. And
did you have hair back then when you first started?
No, I did. Well, yes, of course, some, but not much. I've been like this. I haven't paid for a haircut since 1994.
Saving thousands
of dollars. I'm on my third set of industrial clippers now.
Yeah.
So I started as an industrial designer, and then very quickly kind of moved into this space where we instead of doing traditional industrial design, which is really more about form, more about ergonomics and usability. Back when I first got off the ground, we have sort of graduated into a space where we design much more than point solutions, where we're responsible for designing an entire customer experience from where they find a particular solution that they're looking for, how that solution is experienced before they've purchased it, then the product that they buy, then the service that gets delivered thereafter. So we kind of live across the entire spectrum of our customers' businesses, delivering both the pre-product experience, the product experience, and then the post-product service experience that lives behind it. And so I started this company 15 years ago. Worked in another mostly med tech space before that, industrial goods, med tech, and then started this about 15 years ago. I've actually started a number of companies. The agency that I run kind of lives at the core, and we've spun off a couple of other companies alongside it. And then I teach the manufacturing techniques class at Rhode Island School of Design. So I get all of the third year industrial design students. And I tell my students on the first day of class that my class is the red pill. So if you've seen The Matrix,
yeah,
my class is the reality check, because design school is all about removing barriers, opening up your creative mind. And I tell them, when you get out of school, the constraints are your friend and they are required, and you don't get to avoid constraints. And so we've built a practice here that really embraces constraints and embraces the reality of guardrails as a benefit, not a hindrance to building, market validated creative solutions.
As a teacher, do you just constantly stay current? Do the students challenge you?
They do, and I have to work really hard to stay as many steps ahead of them as I can from an industry standpoint. So yeah. I'm always out. I was in Vietnam last week at factories. I was in China in January. I go to factories locally here, domestic factories, local factories. I'm kind of always in and out of the production world. both for my own learnings and for our clients. So it's they where they really challenge me is on the social side.
Interesting.
That's where it's really like their whole mindset of what work is, what manufacturing should be, what consumption looks like is so different than, you know, what I would have come up through 30 years ago when I was in college.
Do you think that are they hitting the mark? Is it going to? I mean, I'm always interested in that school of thought of trying to really challenge the norm, especially today where I think industry and manufacturing as a whole is changes so drastically, and so rapidly. Is it going to be just something completely different going forward? I mean,
so my opinion on this is migrated over the years. I think young people are both optimistic and conflicted about what this means. Like, I sort of challenge them on the idea of go look in your closet, pick out the number of clothes that you haven't worn in 6 months and tell me why you own them. Then think about what's going to happen to those clothes in 6 months' time when you give them away or you throw them away. And now think about the multiplication problem of all of the versions of you that live in the world. And now think about how many clothes are being produced globally that are going to just go from the store to the closet, from the closet to the landfill and never get worn.
Wow. And
that's an eye-opening conversation to have with a 21-year-old who hasn't really thought about the fact that, I'm buying too much crap. And at the same time, I really try to expose them to the fact that the manufacturing sector is inherently built around efficiency and a lack of waste. It's the whole premise of manufacturing is zero waste. Remove all, and not just waste from a material standpoint, but waste from an energy standpoint, waste from a human resources standpoint. Like, just drive it as close to zero as possible. So when you're thinking about, you know, where to find efficiencies, the manufacturing sector is built on that. It's all they're trying to do is drive it to zero. And you have to find those efficiencies in other places because you're not going to find them as easily in the production world as you will in lots of other parts of society.
It's also performance, right? You have efficiency, you're driving it down, but you're also improving the performance. And I am able to produce this one more garment a day.
Yep.
And
So increasing productivity and driving down, waste is what the manufacturing sector is built around.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world isn't really built that way, in part because we're not incentivized to be like that. Whereas the manufacturing sector is uniquely incentivized to be hyper efficient, hyper productive. Whereas the rest of the world, I mean, even in my agency, like we don't measure productivity in that way. We don't think about our job that way. But you walk into a production facility and they're trying to say, how can I drive 10% more in the same square footage with the same head count? And how can I drive down my scrap rate and drive down my whatever, all of my various metrics that I'm taking on.
Here's a side note, specific to your analogy there, driving efficiency. So I was managing an ethanol facility up in Idaho, and it was a waste to energy type of technology. Oh, cool. And we would be taking potato waste and then producing ethanol from it.
Yeah.
And it sounded fine. It was great. Everything was fine until the supplier became more efficient at cutting potatoes.
Yeah.
Less waste. And don't ask me how they did it, but they did it. And lo and behold, they're getting more out of that potato, and we are getting less, waste, which is good. But then again, it
good for them.
Business model. It just is what it is. I got rid of waste.
It is, and it's so when I'm dealing with my students, that's a big part of what we talk about is the inherent lack of waste in the manufacturing sector as compared to other industries because of the incentives that are built to be efficient. They make more money if they drive up throughput and drive down waste, period, the end. So, and then we kind of use that across the entire spectrum of how we talk about, goods and services, which is aligning those with incentives. And if the incentives are there, people behave differently. If the incentives aren't there, they don't. Like, there's no incentive for you to not fill your closet with more clothes than you can wear.
Interesting.
And so as a result, you will fill your closet with more clothes than you can wear because you can go on the internet and you can buy them for cheap and you can feel good about that purchase at the time. But we don't have a system in place to build good incentives for people to behave differently.
Yeah. You know what that system is? Age. I don't want to deal with it.
I don't want to deal with all this crap. I'm cleaning out we have a 1940s. I have a 1940s trailer that's been sitting in my front yard, and we're going to get rid of it. And it just turned into a storage unit. And my wife and I have spent the last few weekends emptying it out. And we're like, where the hell did all this crap come from? What is all this junk?
Yeah.
We're pretty lean, but
yeah, it just happens. Sorry about digressing. That was fascinating. What we're going to be talking about is specifically about the utility grid and how we can and what jumped out in your conversation is that and people can relate to this. There's a technology. The technology is designed by technology people, and it might be great in the way it's designed, but from a user perspective, the individuals that have to use that platform, it might be suboptimal, sub-liked, and which then you get that issue of where I'm not using the product the way it needs to be used because it's so unfriendly. It's so illogical in some cases, and not to say that it's not meeting the needs, but you're the guy that takes that and tries to bring it together so where me, end user or whatever, I use that product, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's our fundamental role is to connect the user to a technology and say that we have a technology base that lives here. We have a user group that's here. They have a set of needs that they have in order to achieve their goals and their job. And we need to make sure those two things are seamlessly connected together, that they don't end up with extraneous steps that they have to take in order to achieve their goals, which means you have to know their goals.
Yeah.
And understand and not know their goals in a way that's superfluous, but really know why they need what you're providing to them and know why your solution is uniquely qualified to deliver on their need. And once you know those things, you can start to build a product that then satisfies both sides of that equation.
It would seem to me that I would like to have you involved at the beginning of these events, these design efforts, as opposed to after the fact, and then try to figure out how to sort of decouple and make it a better user experience. It would, but that's I don't know if that ever happens.
That is true. It does happen. It happens. I will say it actually has been happening more and more.
Good.
Often. I think, 15 years ago, the design field was almost thought of as lipstick.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Like, we made the thing. We're the engineers. We know how this works. You guys just come in and just make it pretty, please. That was sort of the relationship. Over time, that relationship has matured to now being able to have the understanding for usability as a part of functionality and design delivering usability. So if you're delivering a solution that doesn't have good usability, by default, less people will use it.
Yeah.
And so as a result, you can tie directly revenue, customer retention, customer satisfaction to a well-designed product.
Yeah.
And I think that the really interesting thing for my firm is that we're in a little bit of a weird space for designers. 95% of the companies we work with are purely technical organizations.
Yeah.
And so we come in and we're the weirdos in the room. And it takes there's a trust that has to get built over time for our customers to really understand that our job here is to make the technology that you've created better, not prettier, better. And we're making it better because now your customer can flow through that technology in a way that delivers on the promise that they need it to deliver on, not what you want it to do, but what they need it to do. And that time, the way that we build that bridge takes time. It takes some trust because people are very protective of the thing that they make. And it takes a little time to sort of say, hey, look, like, it's not about whether what you've built is good or it's bad. It's about whether it delivers on the needs for the person who you're trying to deliver it for.
And as a user, I don't like to click, right? I want my business to be, we're just that spoiled. And I would imagine the pressures of what is taking place in the marketplace, just from apps, and people are designing and delivering apps that are smart and high level of usability to it. And it just has trained me. I've used apps why do I have to do that? It's just that takes a lot of effort. That does.
I had a client, this was years ago, say to us in a meeting with a straight face, it's complicated software for smart people. It's supposed to be hard to use.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? No. And I think at the time I picked up my phone, and this was, again, it was a long time ago. And I said, you know how much complexity is in this device?
Yeah.
And it's all shielded from you. And they're not putting that complexity in front of you. They're taking that complexity away, and they're letting the technology do its job, and they're letting you use it in a really seamless way. But they're not forcing you to know how to make that technology do what it's supposed to do. And that's the delivery of a good product.
I agree with you 100%. Absolutely 100%. Speaking of complexity, take us through one of the areas that has me just sort of dazzled, and it's way above my pay grade, no doubt about it. I have a utility background. I love the utility industry. Being a former lineman, climbing and doing all that stuff, I really have a passion for it. But given the pressures that of today on the utility, just utilities in general, to be able to adapt to all of the changes taking place and all of the demands, how do we take something as complex as the grid and make it in such a way that delivers on what you as a designer, I mean, it's got to be, I don't know. I don't even know how to even frame the question. How do you do that?
So let me just frame the problem that we were asked to try to solve, and that might help answer that bigger question. So our client's a company called Utilidata. They have been around for quite a long time. They are fundamentally a pattern recognition company. Fundamentally, what they've done is they've built a really clever technology that allows them to recognize patterns on the grid at certain levels and in certain locations, for them to be able to understand what's happening at the edge of the entire system. So the grid itself is actually relatively dumb all the way at the edge. It's pretty smart in the middle. It's most smart at the beginning. So you have a power plant at one end delivering power into a community. We kind of know what's happening there. We know what's happening as it travels out through the substations. And then as it leaves the substations and it travels all the way through those transmission lines to your home, we lose touch with what's actually happening at the edge of the grid. So this company works the opposite direction. They put technology at the edge of the grid that helps deliver information to effectively home base by listening, for lack of a better term, to what the power is telling them is happening all the way at the edge. So a specific example would be if you have a neighborhood and you see a certain curve in the way that power is being drawn or not drawn, you can know if somebody's got an electric car on their house, a photovoltaic on their house, a large consuming appliance in their house that comes on a regular basis. And you can help inform what kind of electricity needs to be delivered and when, not what kinds, but when you need to deliver electricity and when you don't need to deliver electricity at much higher fidelity, because you have this edge understanding of the space or of the community. So our responsibility was to effectively translate that technology into a software that then the utility can consume the information into their end, because it's two completely different. Think of it like two different languages. One's a language of pushing power out. The other is a language of taking data in, and they didn't have a way to connect those two ideas. So our responsibility was to understand what the utility operators needed, connect that to what the edge technology can deliver, and then embody it in a software that gave the utility visibility in a place where they were otherwise blind. That's fundamentally what we had to do.
See, I couldn't put that into a question. I was like, yeah, I got it. Now I know. Thank you.
I will tell you,
I was in another country.
It took my team 6 months just to be able to articulate the opportunity to ourselves. Like when you get into the nuts and bolts of how all of this stuff works, it's so complicated, and the utility data team is so sophisticated with what they've built that it takes you're peeling this onion over and over and over until you get down to the point where it's like, okay, but I understand what you're doing, but I don't understand why you're doing it. And we had to just sort of open this thing up over a long period of time. Lots of conversations with utilities, lots of conversations with the internal teams, with the external stakeholders, with advisors. And then all of a sudden you kind of have this picture that emerges. And once that picture starts to emerge, you're able to embody that picture into an actual product or tool that people can use. But if you don't have that, you just keep making technology that it's looking for a problem to solve.
Yeah.
Instead of identifying a problem and applying a technology to solve it. And that was the big shift in thinking that the whole group, all us, them, everybody had to find was, well, what are we really solving? And then what's the linchpin for getting our technology to deliver that level of resolution so that you can solve the problem? And it's still evolving. Like the thing we built 4 years ago is no longer the product that's being produced today. Like it's all changing all the time.
Yeah.
So it's this sort of constant process of testing, listening, learning, adjusting, and looping that over and over.
I like the point that you bring out where you're having some intelligence at the edge. That's one thing. One of the stumbling blocks that I always had to deal with is my old school thinking of utilities, where I would have power generation, transmission substations on into, distribution substations, and on into the consumer itself, whatever that might be. Very linear, very one directional.
Right.
Nowadays, because you have distributive energy and you're on the distributive side of that meter, I could never reconcile of how me as a system operator would be able to say, hey, check that out.
Right.
down to the minute detail.
Exactly.
The Joneses, they have a car that is a Tesla, and it's pushing back power the other way, or it's consuming power, or whatever it might be, but it's dynamic. And me as a system operator, how do I even see that? But it can be it could be difficult and impact the grid in a negative way if I don't get that right.
Yeah, I mean, you're in an unusual and unique position to have this conversation because of your experience. Most people think of the grid like they think of the wires in their house. And that's not what the grid is. The grid's like an animal. It's like a living, breathing thing. And it gets bigger and it gets smaller, it gets hotter, it gets colder. It has all of this dynamic movement to the grid. And if you don't know what's happening at the end, at the edge, you can't then drive it to any sort of level of efficiency. I mean, our grid's really old. It's really, really old. It is not built for two-way power. It's not made for us to bring in power from a house. It's made for us to just pump energy out. It is also not made for power to go in waves, daytime, nighttime, windy day, cloud, calm day. It's not made for DERs, distributed energy. It's not made for any of this. It's made to have a hub and spoke model, a big chunk of energy getting made over here, driving power out, and we overcharge the grid like crazy because we have all these losses from beginning to end. And so there's a whole mind shift happening inside the energy sector that is, okay, well, how do we manage this new version of electric distribution?
And there's such inefficiencies that exist. There's just tremendous gains that can happen as a result of doing it right. But the Achilles heel from my perspective is that consumer. And if I come home and I flip the switch and that thing sort of flickers a little bit, or that clock starts blinking at me, I'm upset. I'm mad. They have to be very precise in how they deploy a smart grid solution.
100%. And I tell my students the same thing, and I say it to clients. People buy things, whether you're a B2B technology service provider or you're direct to consumer, doesn't matter. People buy things under the assumption of the big picture working well. That's why they buy things, right? Like this car is going to drive me from point A to point B, and it's going to do that at some level of power or some level of efficiency or some level of luxury, whatever that is. The reason people walk away from solutions is because of stupid little things. That's why we walk away, right? You make a thing, it works amazingly well when you get it, and then you start to use it a little. Like I have a Volkswagen ID4 that there have been days I want to just drive it back to the dealership and park it. And it's not over anything big. It's over like, why did you hide the icon for the heated steering wheel that I don't want to have on, and now I can't find how to turn it off?
And I don't like it. It's constant. I'm not comfortable.
Yeah, you're driving me crazy. Now the reality is the car drives great. It's super efficient. It looks good enough. It's very like all the things they said it was going to be, it is. But those little details are what get people really, really annoyed if you get them wrong. And that's the power that a good design has over a bad design. You mask all those little weird idiosyncrasies, and people just use the stuff. And if you expose those idiosyncrasies, people walk away.
But here's the funny thing: I take for granted my power. It just goes on. I don't even think about it, right?
Right.
The only time I think about it is when it's a pain, or when I lose it, or whatever happening out there, and I'm thinking to myself, "What the heck's going on?" And the reality is that if you're doing your job right, nobody notices.
Nobody notices. It's the hardest thing about the field that we're in.
It is.
We do our job perfectly. Nobody even knows we're there. They don't think about it. They just get the thing, they use the thing, they put the thing down, and they're happy. Yeah. And if we do our job poorly, they know exactly who to blame. It's like, who designed this junk?
Yeah. And as we talk about the utility challenge, I guarantee you, all of this high-tech equipment, all of this very sensitive stuff, we don't deliver on it. We don't deliver, reliable power delivered at 60 cycles per second, no variation in the voltage. It's all clean.
Yep.
Then a lot of this other stuff that we just take for granted, all of the technology that sits in front of us, it doesn't like that.
Doesn't like it at all. Yeah, not at all. Yeah, and I think, if you extrapolate that same idea outside of the grid and you put that into any other industrial, I think the industrial sector really, the industrial sector is really waking up to this idea very quickly, because the line operator in a manufacturing facility who has to run a big piece of hardware, they also have a phone in their pocket, and they also drive a car that's well designed, and they also have a house whose grid works the way they expect it to. And so there is an expectation for functionality that exists outside of sort of the traditional consumer brands or consumer electronics world that's now showing up. If you're going to go build a connected worker system, well, your expectation is that that's going to work as well as Spotify. Like, I shouldn't have a connected worker solution in a manufacturing sector that causes me challenges for how I set up a user or how I set up a particular workflow or how I set up an alert. Like, I should be able to do that like I do it on my phone. And that reality is very much coming to light inside the industrial sectors. And that's the place that we bring our expertise.
You're right. And I agree. I see it happening within manufacturing where what used to take for a CNC machine, very challenging, programming of a particular part, to now they're getting it and they're driving to even simpler ways to deliver more complex parts.
Exactly.
And being able to do it efficiently. And for me as a operator, I don't have to, I'm enjoying the experience, which is good. And then, but yeah.
I mean, people who are frustrated with the technology that they use, they're less efficient. They're not going to make good decisions. You're distracting them from the thing you really need them to do, which is their actual job. And so, as I said, I think the market is waking up to the idea that well-designed products in that space make you more efficient, which means you make more money.
Yeah.
Period. The end.
It's a no-brainer. All right, where do you see it going? I mean, if you're just sort of put your future hat on, where do you see it going? What do you?
I think the bar's pretty low still in most of these sectors.
So really?
I think, if you just compare the level of usability and sophistication in your pocket to your workplace, if you work in an industrial sector, that gap's still very, very large. Yes. I think we're going to continue to see that gap close. I think we're going to see automation. And I don't mean automation. I mean business practice automation, workplace automation, start to really impact in a more meaningful way. I think up until now, it's been a bit. I don't want to call it frivolous, but it's not. It hasn't had the bottom line impact that I think a lot of people were looking for when you started to convert from an analog to a digital practice within, especially in the manufacturing sector. And I think that we're finally at the point where we from a technology standpoint understand where you can apply these to improve business practices rather than just always thinking about them from a process standpoint. And merging those two things together is going to give people, those who can figure it out are going to have a pretty big competitive advantages over those who don't. And I was just in 3 facilities in Vietnam last week. And the level of sophistication of these 3 facilities was extremely impressive. And everything they were doing was in an effort to drive up their margin. You could see it throughout. Everything you walk through is about them driving up their margin, which means, in theory, they can deliver a higher quality product with less waste, with less rejects, with probably at lower prices. But if you think about their incentives, this is, coming back to where we started, their incentive is, I need to drive up my margin. So if I'm going to drive up my margin, I'm going to figure out ways to apply this technology with that as my focus. How do I drive up my margin? And then the results are, I get benefits for everybody else.
Yeah.
I get benefits for my workforce. I get benefits for my customers. I get benefits for my future resilience of my organization. And so I think that's we're going to continue to see things move in that direction where these technologies really get applied to help raise margins of manufacturers, raise margins of organizations, and that then drives all sorts of other benefits.
Yeah, I think it's undeniable. I think that it's a great time. I think it's a renaissance. I think people are beginning to embrace that, and I can appreciate that. And everybody benefits as a result of that.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time.
Yeah, and for domestic manufacturers, the pressure that domestic manufacturers are under requires that to be done at probably larger scales and at faster speeds. That has to happen more quickly because you don't have the benefit of low-cost labor and low-cost power, low-cost real estate, low-cost all the rest of it. And so domestic manufacturers are really being pushed to crack that code as quickly as possible to stay competitive.
Just look at SpaceX. I mean, they just drive to be able to turn around a rocket as fast as they possibly can, and everything is associated with that. And they recognize the necessity to drive down costs as much as possible so that interplanetary, travel exists, and they have to do that, or it will never.
Right, and I mean, they're in a really unique spot in that their primary competitor, prior to other privatized rocket companies, is so wasteful.
It is.
They're so wasteful.
They are.
That the bar was pretty low for them, and now they're driving it to a place where, you're gonna. I think it's gonna benefit everybody because anybody who comes into that space now, no pun intended, anybody who comes into that arena now has to be competitive at those speeds, at those costs. And yet they still have to manage risk. I mean, let's not pretend like they have a ton of risk. And watching them pull off the technologies that they're pulling off. I mean, that Falcon Heavy, catching a Falcon Heavy as it's landing was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my. I mean, I was fortunate enough
in my entire life.
So I was I was 8 years old. Is that right? I was 8 years old when I went to watch the first shuttle launch in Florida in 1981. And I can still remember the feeling of it. It like shakes your whole body as it goes up. And I didn't get to see that Falcon Heavy land, but I can understand why the audience, it was like watching a sporting event. It was wild.
It was wild. And they're shooting it off today.
Are they really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Starship. It's going off in the afternoon, later in the afternoon, so that they can see it land, the Starship land in daylight.
That's amazing. And
then they have, what they're trying to test. They're trying to test some of their tiles. So they're coming in at a steeper decline coming in to push the levels of those tiles and see how they're just trying to break it in such a way that they can come up with the data, and they're pulling data the whole time, and then come in faster to catch you with the chopsticks the heavy.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean,
Come on.
And I mean, they're in this real way. They have taken what was once sort of black box of development, and they're really applying a lot of consumer technology ideas to it. Like this idea that you're going to rapidly prototype and test ideas and allow things to break and allow things to not work correctly obviously in a safe way.
Yeah.
That comes out of that's the consumer products world. That's the consumer electronics world. That's the consumer software world, right? Like that's this idea of like release a piece of software and then update. They're taking that mindset and in a pretty clever way, applying it to an area where nobody did that before. NASA didn't do that. They spent 20 years thinking, and then they put something into space and they hoped it didn't blow up. And now you're testing and trying and testing and trying, and they think of the amount of computer simulation opportunities that they have, and they're still going to just fly it. Just going to fly it. Yeah. Make sure it works.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing. I mean, I follow Formula One really closely. I really like Formula One, and I think Formula One is this incredible laboratory. It's like a living laboratory of this conflict between theory and practicality.
Yes.
Because you go through all of this simulation work, you do all this work in a wind tunnel, but you don't know until the driver sits in the car and it goes around a track and the bumps are there and the wind is there and another car is there and a trailing car is there. And then you really learn, what do we got? Did we do it well or did we not do it well? And, I think that idea, that mindset from a product standpoint is really valuable. Because if you spend all your time thinking and you aren't out trying and testing and learning, you can convince yourself that anything is great. And then you get out there and you put it in front of a user, or in their case, put a driver in the driver's seat and let them tell you what's working and what's not working. And all of a sudden you hear the radio chatter. This car is bouncing to the point where I can't see what is happening.
Right.
And the engineers are all scratching their heads saying like, well, in the wind tunnel and the simulations, we didn't see any bouncing. And yet if all they had done is look back 40 years, you'd have seen that the old ground effects cars from 40 years ago, they all bounced. And it's like, it's a real problem to solve. And it doesn't embody itself until you get it out from inside the thinking, out of your brain and into the world. And then once it's in the world, you learn all the things you didn't know. And
to your point about F1, I think that's like the top of the pyramid example of how you can achieve that manufacturing efficiency, because they know exactly what's happening with that car. They know exactly everything associated with that, and they're dialing it in to a thousandth of a second. That's how precise they are, which just blows my mind. You know how I got hooked on F1? I was like, what's this F1 thing? So I'm watching it. So what? They're going around, zipping around. That's fine. It was the pit stop.
Oh, God.
Guy comes in. 2 seconds later, I said, whoa, what the heck? What was that?
Yeah.
We're gone. And I said, oh.
Yeah. I think the record's like 1.85 seconds to change 4 tires on a car.
Yeah.
I mean, you got like 30 guys, but still, it's really fast.
It's real fast.
Yeah, and you think about like how much work went into just designing the wheel nut.
That's so true.
How much work went into designing that wheel nut. And, if they make 2 stops and you pick up a second for each stop and you gain 2 seconds over the course of a race, like that's meaningful.
That's huge.
And that wheel nut and the gun. I mean, I forget which team was struggling with their pit stops, and they sort of dialed it down to like the wheel nut and the gun needed a redesign in order to be able to do this faster. And
it's amazing.
Yeah, it's totally, and this gets back to those, like, it's the little details, those little things that you do that Formula One's a really interesting, like I said, it's like a giant laboratory.
That's just all it is.
For figuring out how to develop things faster, how to execute ideas that are extremely complicated in the real world faster and more accurately, it's quite a spectacle.
It really is. You as a designer can definitely appreciate it. And I'm me as just a casual. I still geek out on it. By the way, Vegas is this week.
It is this week. Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be 47 degrees on race night.
Is it really?
47. I can't wait.
See, there it is.
I can't wait.
To have a car that responds in that type of weather.
47. The driver's hands are going to be really cold. That's cold. So
that is.
I think it's a little colder than last year, and they were worried last year.
Yeah, at 200 miles per hour. Yeah, that's cold.
Nuts, totally nuts. Hopefully they welded up all the sewers down correctly this time.
Can you believe that? Oh god.
Yeah,
that must have been scary.
That was $1 million.
Yeah, and he got $1
million because he sucked a sewer cap off the road and destroyed the bottom of the car.
Yeah,
think of the force. Those things are heavy. Car rode over it and just bam.
Suck.
Yep. So
hey, we got to wrap this up, man.
Yeah. We can go all day. This is good.
Yeah. I was like,
what should we talk about next?
Yeah, big time. How do people get a hold of you there? Justin, let's say.
Probably the easiest way is LinkedIn. My company website is octopd.com, so OCTO, P like Paul, D like David.com, or Justin Sirotin on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two easiest ways to get in touch.
There you go. Well, we're going to have all the contact information for you out on Industrial Talk. You are fantastic.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me. This was fun. I really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. You might not have covered what I covered everything I wanted to hear about.
Good. Yeah. I'm following your lead. So
there you go. All right.
I'll roll with you.
You need to reach out to Justin. That's a must. That's a to-do. We're going to wrap it up on the other side. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
You're listening to the Industrial Talk Podcast Network.
Oh, yeah. How about that? That was fun. That was a great combo. Yeah, you need to reach out to Justin. Put that on your to-do list. Easy. LinkedIn. Right there. He's got some great insights. His team at OCTO delivering some really great solutions. They look at things through a designer's eye. I like that. I like the whole thing. Paper and pencil. And if you haven't gotten through the whole thing, you need to come back, listen to it again, fast forward, slow down, whatever it takes to get that content into your noggin. Good stuff. All right. Again, I'm going to reiterate. Industrial Talk is here for you. You got a podcast, you've got technology, you want to be on the podcast, you go out to Industrial Talk. Easy. Reach out to me. You'll have a conversation with me. I'm not a bad person. I'm easy to talk to. All right. Be bold, be brave, dare greatly. We're going to have some more great conversations coming to you at Industrial Talk, so stay tuned.